Matt, welcome back to Hi Haley.
Great to be back.
You say that every time.
Something to say.
Okay. So for today's question, to kick off the warm weather we're having, what is your favorite thing to do outside in Minnesota now that it's warmer?
Well, in Minnesota, summers are sacred. So
Yep,
on the weekends, everyone goes to whatever lake they can find. So that's probably what I would say is going to the lake.
that's a good answer. All right. We're going to talk about something fun and different today, pivoting a little bit away from our usual, discussing Copilot. So today we're going to walk through a little bit of the overview, just the different types of Copilot, Copilot Studio, and then also make an agent using Copilot Studio. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Let's get into it.
All right. So I guess we can just kind of start here and just talk about the differences between Copilots. So whenever a lot of people think about Copilot, they think about what I call the big Copilot, where you go to like
Mhm.
copilot.microsoft.com. And that's like the chat GPT style Copilot. Um, Now, there's another type of Copilot that's in Power Platform. It's actually called Copilot Studios, where you can actually make customized agents. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and that's really the way that you can build repetitive processes and automate things to your business processes. Um, Again, a lot different than the big Copilot. I wish they had slightly different names, but the way I like to think about it is big Copilot is copilot.com. Little Copilot is the one in Power Platform.
And now, do users have to pay for this, or can anyone come in there and do what we're going to do today?
Yes, you have to pay for it. So it's
Okay.
paid for by the action. So how
Okay.
many messages that the Copilot gets and things that it does. So there is some fees related to it. Now these change all the time. So by the time someone watches this video, it might have completely changed from what it is today. But there are fees associated with using Copilot Studio. All right, so I am on the Power Platform page right now. So um, just like any other Power Platform tool like Power Automate, Power Apps, Power Pages, you can access pretty much everything from any of the different sites. So when we go to, I'm just on powerapps.com right now. When we go to an actual solution, we're going to see that there's now an Agents tab here. This is that Copilot element that we're going to actually create to create that agent. Now, in future videos, we're going to be adding things like Power Automate flows that the agent can hook into. So we've just got a single solution for that right now. And we can also add tables and things like that. So the Copilot can go through the same application lifecycle management processes as any other Power Platform tool, um, which is a really strong feature to have for testing and rolling things out slowly and things like that. So to create our agent, what I'm going to do is going to go ahead and click New. Then we're going to click Agent, and then I'm just going to click Agent here. And then we're going to see it's going to bring me to Copilot Studio. So once this loads here. All right, so the first thing we're going to see it does is it brings us to a Copilot page here where it's trying to get me to talk to a Copilot to create the actual agent. I find it's easier to just create it myself instead of going back and forth with the chatbot. So we're just going to go ahead and click skip to configure. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give the agent a name. So what we're going to be doing with this agent is we're just going to make this kind of a all-in-one Ascendex helper. So we're going to call him Clippy. Bring back a little nostalgia for the old days.
They
And
should
then
have
we're going
kept
to
that.
what's that?
They should have kept that.
Yeah. Rename Copilot to Clippy.
There we go.
All right, so then we're just going to describe what it does. So Clippy is an all-in-one helper agent. And then what we can do here is we can give it instructions. So basically like the initial prompt that we could have for the Copilot or the agent. So we can tell it like, hey, this is what you actually do. So if anyone asks the the agent kind of what it's capable of doing. This is one of those things that it can actually answer. I'm going to leave this blank for now. We're going to fill this in later. But just wanted to kind of call out that that is an option to fill in here. So the next thing we can do is add some starter prompts. So this is basically if you were using the agent in chatbot mode, this is kind of the greeting that you would get from the actual chatbot. So I'm going to just go ahead and click Add Starter Prompt. And then we're just going to say, welcome. We're just going to say save. And you'll see that we could have a bunch of different options there. So that basically every time you start a chat, it might give you a different greeting or things like that. And then the last piece here is the knowledge. So we're going to cover this in detail in another video, but the knowledge is basically the sources that we have that Copilot or the agent can actually pull from. So things like SharePoint, actual websites, any other databases you have, it can pull data from that. But now that I've got all this filled in, we're going to go ahead and click Create. And then this is going to take a minute or two to set up our agent. There we go. All right, so now that we have our agent created, what we're going to see is that on the top, we've got our Clippy name of our agent here. And then we also have a couple different tabs up at the top. So overview is basically all those settings that we had to start off when we actually created that agent. But if I just scroll down a little bit, we're going to see that we have our details here that we can edit. If we want to change things like the description or any general instructions that we want to give the agent, we can do that here. But what I also want to point out here is this orchestration. So agents can be used in kind of orchestration mode so that instead of using it in kind of the traditional chatbot mode, we can have it so that when any action is taken in an external system, so things like when we get an email that comes in, we can have the agent look at the email, figure out what to do with it, and then take some specific action with it. Or we can have it take an action whenever a new record is inserted into the Dataverse, for example. So that's going to be this checkbox here. And then this is how you would disable it. If you didn't want to use that and just wanted to use it in pure chatbot mode, you could check that box. So the next thing we're going to have here is going to be our topics. And what we're going to see up on the top is that a lot of these things that I'm covering right here are also tabs on the top. So we're just going to cover them on the overview tab, and if we need to, we'll jump up to the individual tabs for it. But what this topics does is that whenever the agent basically senses that you're trying to convey a topic, whether it's through an actual chat that you're doing, or if it's going to be through like one of those orchestration actions, like if you've got an email, it could look into one of those topics, and then when it figures out what topic you're trying to utilize, then it can take those specific actions. And again, we're going to get into the topics in more detail later, and we'll actually create a couple topics. But just for now, we just want to give everyone kind of an overview of what it is. So the next thing we have, again, is knowledge. We touched on this a little bit earlier. But knowledge is what actually feeds data into the agent. So again, we can do things like grab data from Salesforce. We can grab SharePoint files, Dataverse data. Pretty much anything you can think of, you can add in as knowledge here and allow the Copilot to actually utilize that information. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is this allow the AI to use its own general knowledge. This is basically like the traditional Copilot information. So when you ask Copilot a question, it's going to try to figure out, based on the knowledge it has, what that answer is. I've found that turning this off is usually much more preferred, so that you don't get things like the Copilot giving you an answer that it doesn't actually know. So when it's turned off, if it doesn't know the answer, it's going to say, I don't have that information, which is in kind of business scenarios, I'd much prefer that to it just making something up or giving incorrect information. So we're just going to turn that off for now. And then here's what it's basically saying here. It's only going to reference information that it finds under the knowledge tab, which is what we want in this scenario. All right. So did that turn itself off? Now it turned itself off. All right. So the next thing we have here is going to be the actions. The way I like to think about this is that these are essentially like Power Automate flows. That's the easiest way to kind of think of it. Um, so whenever the agent decides that it needs to take an action, it's going to follow whatever we have in this tab here to actually complete that task. So again, very similar to um, Power Automate. And when we get to that in the coming videos here, we'll go through what that actually looks like. And then finally here we have the triggers. This is again that orchestration element. So if I just click add a trigger here, and then we're going to go to library. Okay, we got to turn orchestration on, so we'll do that quick. Then while that's loading, we'll see here that it's just warning us that this is a billable feature, so this consumes some of those licensing elements. Whenever it takes one of these triggers, we're going to get billed for it. All right, so now that this is loaded, we're going to see that these are just some of the options for what can happen through Copilot Studio. So an example is we can run the Copilot every day at a certain time, or we can do things like when a new email arrives and then process that email, maybe send it to a specific folder or delete it if it looks like spam, things like that. We can also do things like process Teams messages. We can do anything when Dataverse changes are made or SharePoint items that come in here. So you'll see that it's really strong at kind of the Microsoft integration. So anything that happens in your Microsoft platform, you can probably handle through a trigger here. Then if I just click on the library tab, doesn't look like we have anything there. But if I just go back to the all tab, we'll see that there's currently 90 triggers that are in here. And we'll see things like Gmail is an option, DevOps, which is really nice for when you're processing your code in DevOps, and then things like OneDrive, Power BI, lots of stuff available here for triggers to run off of. All right, so that's kind of the basic overview. The last thing I wanted to kind of cover here in this video before we go into depth in some of the other topics is going to be the channels. So the channels tab here basically determines where we're going to actually deploy this agent. So if we're using it in orchestration mode, there's no channel that we need to use because it's going to basically take whatever information it's fed based on the whatever that element is that we chose. But what we can also do is we can deploy it as a chatbot to a bunch of these different areas here. So we can do things like deploy it to Teams. So this is what we actually do at Ascendex. We have an internal chatbot that we coincidentally called Clippy. But that can do things like create IT tickets. It can give us basic information about our CRM, and it can also do some other things like query our SharePoint and things like that. But what you can also do is you can put this onto a website as a chatbot, pulling all your information out of the agent here. And then we also have some other options like Slack and Facebook, things like that. So lots of different options here, but again, the channels is used for when you actually want to deploy it as a chatbot. If you want to use it in kind of orchestration mode, that's where we're going to go back to the overview tab and use the triggers. So then finally, now that we've kind of looked at the channels, when we want to actually test the agent, and we're going to go through this in depth in future videos, when we want to test that agent, we're going to go over to the right side here, and we'll see that we have that chatbot function. And then we can actually test when we're actually making changes here, and the system will actually make those updates. It'll run through those topics and those actual actions. But again, really good way to test here without having to deploy it to Teams or anything like that. And then when we're ready to actually get this going, we can click publish, and then we're kind of off to the races. Then we can use it in our different channels here. So that's what we kind of have to start here. Again, in future videos, we're going to cover the knowledge, topics, and actions. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what we have for today.
Well, thank you, Matt. Appreciate that overview. We'll go ahead and get ready for our second one.
All right.